are 9 of them listed here. I believe there are 10 in the official report now, to really show different kinds of ways to bridge the digital divide and provide connectivity. What my key takeaway in the first slide is, first point is, really there's a number of different technological solutions tailored to different geographic situations, population densities, and economic situations in ways that can be quite effective. And one of the challenges we have is figuring out where to right size each type of intervention to give proper guidance to people to understand when each is best. We actually hear a lot of discussion about the importance of backhaul and IXPs and the costs associated with it. And in fact, also the importance of harnessing energy. Many of the deployments we are talking about are off-grid deployments that bring electric power to communities for the first time, as well as providing internet connectivity. So as a brief overview, that is what we've accomplished. This report is ongoing. It will be published early next year, but the opportunity of this session is to present to you the initial results, but to also obtain from you your further input on other ways, other examples we should be presenting.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And I think that's really put us in the context and the environment. And it was also a pleasure to work with you and Sharada. I want to thank her. I don't see Sharada is, okay. Okay, she's in the back of the room, and together with Mili, they were instrumental in putting this document together. So thank you very much for all this work. And without now further delay, let's hear a little bit from the experts and then from the ground leaders who are here today. I'm going to start with Olga Cavalli. Olga is chair of the Internet Society Argentinian chapter and also is a board member from Internet Society. Olga, could you share with us your experience and the challenges to get connected the next billion? Thank you. Can you? Okay,
there.
You got it.
Okay, thank you very much, Raquel. And I want to commend you for this report. I've been reading it. It's really impressive, especially what really is related with my work at the university, which is education and relation with ICTs and education, which is the goal number 4. I'm really impressed. I went through all the projects, and most of them are mainly related with enhancing the infrastructure. But I would like to comment a little bit, a step forward from enhancing the infrastructure, which is how we can use the technology to help young people and children to get information and skills related with technology. So if you look at the numbers, primary education is in developing countries about more than 90% achieved. But the problem is still in many countries is secondary education, and it's also an issue in Latin America. Not all the young people finish their secondary education. That means that they are more more vulnerable. A young guy or girl who is not educated, it's difficult for them to get a job. It's difficult for them to be economically independent. This is also a problem for women. If they are not economically independent, they are also more vulnerable to violence at home. So one thing that I would like to stress is the fact that if we can train young people in, for example, programming, that could be an easy way for them to achieve a good job. But at the same time, there is a high demand for programmers in developing countries. You cannot develop a country without technical skills in young people and in young professionals. But that doesn't mean that you have to go to university and do 3-4 years of formal education. There is an interesting example in Argentina that is run by the government from the Ministry of Production, that it's called 111,000. How do I say that in English? Well, it's a number, it's a high number. So the idea is to train more than 100,000 programmers per year. But it's a short program of two quadrimestres, how do you say, 4 quarters of, so in 1 year, young students, girls and boys, can get skills in programmers. But the interesting thing of this project it is not done alone by the government. It's done in partnership with universities, with technical schools, with companies, with the business sector, and also with associations, industry associations. So this is interesting because it's very difficult for the government to do this alone. It must be done in a multi-stakeholder environment and with a multi-stakeholder private sector, public sector partnership together. Other thing that I wanted to share with you, so I think that would help the satisfy the demand from the technical companies needing more programmers, and at the same time that enables young people to have this education in programmers. Also, the program is focused to entrepreneurship. It's not only training for coding, but it's also has some training for entrepreneurship. One thing that I have noticed also in small and medium enterprises in Latin America is that they use online information to start small projects. They get some short training in YouTube to perhaps to paint or to build a small machine or to do some electric small pieces of machines, and then they can start a small project. So what I found very interesting is that how you make the first step in a project, it is sometimes made by information that it's online. And I think that the role, for example, of ISOC and ISOC chapters and ISOC special interest group is very important because they are in contact with the community and they can be the catalyst for this change. And finally, I don't want to take all the time, but I would like to mention something. In endangered areas, sometimes connectivity is not available. But ICTs can be also, and information can be delivered without connectivity, perhaps through content that could be delivered in some devices, perhaps through satellite connections. That is something that we have to have in mind. Not only connectivity, but areas that doesn't have connectivity could have another ways to achieve content. Of course, it could be great in their own languages. And I will stop here. I may comment after that. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Olga. Thank you very much. It's important the participation of the young people. And we can see here at the IGF how powerful and engaged they are. So we have a lot of young participants, the youth programs all around. And so that also brings us a clue where we should be going. So next, let's hear Jack Key is my colleague also in the IGF MAG, and she works with APC in the women's programs, right? And it's my partner in crime. For those here, let me do some advertisement. We have a main session on gender, also tackling SDG 5. So she's my partner in crime. Jack, can you share a little bit your thoughts around connecting the next billion and the gender empowerment? Thank you.
Thanks, Raquel, partner in crime. Yes, so I will share with you a little bit about the work that I have been doing around the Best Practice Forum on Gender. For the past 2 years, we've been looking at BPF on gender and access. And let's take a moment to pause on SDG 5. No? It's about access to ICTs to achieve gender equality and to empower all women. So pausing on equality. First of all, we can't achieve equality without human rights. So human rights is a really important framework when we think about access to the internet, without which is kind of just gestural rather than really trying to achieve equality. So for example, the OHCHR report on bridging the gender digital divide is a useful document to that end. Then second is about empowering all women and girls. And that means that we have to understand women and girls as not a singular group of people with shared interests, and therefore, one woman will represent everybody, but that there are really, really distinct and specific differences within this sort of group that is being called women as well. And how do we start to pay attention to this distinction and this specificity in a way that is very helpful towards achieving this very important policy and target. So this also means that we cannot have one set of indicators that rule them all, unfortunately, but that we have to really sort of pay a little bit more attention towards how do we engage in research, in understanding different kinds of initiatives, targeting which particular groups and communities of women. So this is the work that we tried to start to do at this year's BPF, but just to bring in some lessons from last year's Best Practice Forum work as well. Some lessons that we got is that, firstly, to think about access is that existing gender disparity matters. This will affect all things. So whether this gender disparity is in terms of economic, education, access and control to resources, this will have a very direct and clear impact to access issues. Second is that barriers are specific to specific communities of women, as I mentioned earlier. And that thirdly is that culture and norms play a huge role in this matter. And that meaningful access also means including things that are not just about economic empowerment or education, but also about pleasure and about leisure, about things that make life meaningful. And this also responds to the value lag in access, no? Why will I spend the little money that I have on getting access if I'm not the breadwinner, if breadwinner is being put forward as the only reason for access? So, so yeah, this is not the only dimension in life that matters to people. So this year we started to look at specific groups of women for the BPF work, and we have about 5 groups, which I won't talk about them all, but maybe pause on 3. So the first is around refugee women. And for refugee women, it is a context of crisis. It's a context of precarity. It's a context of where you are also where you have great restriction of movement, and where cultural norms play a huge role, as well as discrimination in terms of your ability to even begin to access infrastructure and access infrastructure that may or may not be there. But then information is really critical. Information about what is happening, about a changing context out there, what about aid and so on, connection to families. This can transform, if you have access to information, this can truly transform your sort of relationship and your location as a passive recipient of information to agents of decision making and change based on your ability to access information and to be able to exchange experiences. So this in and of itself presents a really interesting way to understand, okay, so what does it mean then to address access issues for refugee women in particular contexts? And of course, this is again not a monolithic group. It changes from space to space. And then second, we looked at indigenous women and indigenous community. Again, very important to note that this is not the same everywhere, but that there were some things that came out is that the value of access to the internet is actually about sharing important information about community and family events, because they are often in quite remote locations. So to connect from one place to another, this is where access to information and communications technologies becomes very, very useful. And also, of course, to build education and skills and capacity. But what happens is we have the problem of gatekeeper. So this is where we look into very specific indigenous communities itself, and often there is a head of the village that then becomes the person that decides all kinds of decision making. And I think this is also something that we are seeing in community access projects that aims to look at access at community level in the last mile. And you often sort of have to negotiate and engage with existing decision-making and social structures that is very gendered in the community itself. So you have to negotiate this and think about it, and therefore access is not just about the most relevant or appropriate or affordable form of infrastructure, but it is also about having to think through governance and decision-making, no? From the type of infrastructure, to management, to resource distribution, to conflict resolution, and so forth. And that the promise of access is also the capacity to be able to transform power relationships from within the community itself. And that is quite exciting. We tried to look at women with disabilities, but unfortunately we couldn't get too much findings, which is a shame, because this is really a huge community of people with lots of work and a lot of policy gains as well. And I will not go too much into this, but come to the BPF workshop session if you want to talk more about this. And finally, about lesbian, bisexual, and trans and queer women. And this access to the internet is actually super critical to gather information that is explicitly blocked or censored, because it is about sexuality, about finding community, and also about organizing for rights, about being able to be recognized as full citizens, regardless of his sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. So for example, in Vietnam and in Lebanon, the ability to be able to connect and access internet has actually been instrumental and directly linked to the ability to be able to organize for offline kinds of ability to exercise their rights. So just to conclude briefly there, I think we have to be more specific about what we mean about women and girls, to challenge our own assumptions about value, use, and response, and then the importance of also framing this from the perspective of access for enabling the realization of the full range of human rights, without which there will be no equality.
Thank you so much, Jack, and to bring all this work from the BPF, which is great, and I'm sure we are going to hear much more and include in the report, in the final report. And now I want to call Cheryl Miller. Cheryl is Director of International Public Policy at Verizon, and she has also been supporting a lot of this groundwork. So let's hear more on your experience and those cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm short. I've got to get closer to the microphone. I sort of began my career working on internet issues 17 years ago at Sun Microsystems, but connectivity and the issues around it have always been very personal to me. So growing up, I was actually one of the last people or last students in my school to have a computer. We were living in New York. I grew up with my grandparents, so they were an older generation. They were not really tech savvy. We lived on a salary of about $11,000 a year. This was back in 1996 for a family of 3. And so to actually buy a computer for my grandpa, he surprised me one day with a computer. It's about $1,000 out of $11,000. So that was actually, it was kind of a big deal. And when he did that, I didn't have the heart to tell him I needed to be connected, though. And that was going to cost even more. It didn't just stop there at the computer. And so what I used to do is I was a runner. I ran track, so I would run to my friends' houses. And my friends had very tech-savvy households, and they taught me how to use the internet. They taught me how to get online. They taught me all the benefits of it, et cetera. And so really it was the community around me that really helped me to understand that. And since then, I just fell in love with all the policies surrounding it, and I just always wanted to be more involved in the connectivity issues themselves. But I want to talk a little bit about SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. We use so many acronyms in this space, right? SDG 5, gender equality, and I know that there's been a lot of great work at the Internet Governance Forum on this. I really do want to commend Jack and her team. They've been really amazing in the work that they've done on this particular SDG. I'm really thankful for that. Getting ready for this, though, I looked up the definition of gender equality, and it stated that it is the state in which access to rights or opportunities is unaffected by gender. And I also kind of was poking around on the internet, and I read a statistic that really made me pause. It said that closing the wage and gender gap will take 177 years if we don't start addressing the issue more vigorously. Now, that's scary for me because I certainly won't be around then. And 177 years, when you really think about it, that's huge. And so we certainly do have a lot of work to do on this issue. The internet really is a platform that I think can help us to achieve greater gender equality through digital inclusion. But globally, women are still about 50% less likely to be connected to the internet than men. And there are a number of different reasons from this. And this statistic comes from the Web Foundation. I'm not just pulling out numbers, out of thin air or anything like that. I think it's important that we understand when we talk about things like digital literacy as well, that we have a problem with literacy, period. Not only just digital literacy, but a large population of the world doesn't know how to read. And I think when we're at the IGF, we're also fortunate, we're privileged. We need to understand when we look around the room, this is not representative of the world. So we really need to think and understand that as we're looking at these different issues. So my company, Verizon, is really committed to improving this situation in a number of different ways. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some of them. First of all, we've launched a new initiative around innovative learning. And many of these programs, they're through what we have, it's called the Verizon Foundation. And so if you have an organization that wants to apply for a grant and you are focused on digital literacy, healthcare, et cetera, any of the sustainable development goals that we're really focused on, you can apply for a grant. Go online to the Verizon Foundation or find me, email me. I'm happy to give you more information on that. But a number of these programs are put in place to ensure that young girls are empowered and that they have access to technology and STEM education. We recently have committed $160 million to provide free technology, free access, and immersive hands-on learning to kids in need. So that's something that I was really proud of that we have recently launched. But it doesn't just stop there with the funding. It's not only about the funding. So what we're doing is we're trying to administer these programs and create them in partnership with leading nonprofits. Another track that we are involved in is what I would call tech immersion. So we're really trying to combine technology with role models for young people. And we're teaching them how to code, how to become more involved in 3D design, robotics. And the results have been really kind of just amazing to watch, and it's amazing to interact with these young people. We've also been digitizing schools. So what we want to do is really get on the front end and change the way teachers actually teach and the way students learn. So we're keeping very close metrics to track these programs. And one example that I have, we found that 1.5 times as many sixth graders in one of our innovative learning schools has been able to improve their math compared to those students that are not in those schools. And there are a lot of other metrics online. If you go online to the Verizon Foundation, you can kind of read more about it. I don't want to take up too much time on that. And then we have also launched a number of innovative learning labs and apps challenges. And I'm really proud to say that through a lot of these different programs, the girls are the ones that are leading. The girls that are the ones that are winning the competitions. They're the ones that are developing the new apps, et cetera. And so it's been really amazing to watch the program grow, and we're definitely really proud of it. So another thing that my company is very involved in is making sure that we find and recruit women to be in positions of leadership. So there are a lot of Verizon women that you will see throughout the IGF. You'll see Kathy Brown, former Verizon. You'll see Teresa Swinehart of ICANN, et cetera. And if you ever sit in a meeting with Verizon staff, there will always be more women than men. That's something I'm very proud of because when we meet with other companies, it's something that sometimes it definitely stood out for me when I interviewed with them. And we're also very dedicated to just including women. So if I see that there's a conference that's ongoing and the panel does not have representation, globally and gender-wise, I'll literally call and say and suggest people to put on that panel. I think we all need to do a good job of that, just really keeping the community of women involved and providing opportunities for one another moving forward. So I want to give a huge shout out to the One World Connected team. They're a program that we support, and I'm so proud of them. Sharda, Muge, and the growing team of fellows, they've done really tremendous work. Women, again, I like to point that out. But I think that finding partnerships like this, if your organization's able to do that, it's so great, and I really encourage you to do it. And I really encourage you, if you're a woman at the IGF who is looking to become involved, talk to the companies that are here. Verizon's not the only one. We have Facebook, many other companies. They have these great programs, and they're looking to find, we're focused on diversity. We want to include diverse voices. And also, if your organizations that could improve your level of diversity and gender inclusion, think about that. Look around the room. There are plenty of amazing and smart and talented women. Get to know them and get to see what opportunities that you both can share. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thanks to you, Cheryl. It's really, really great work, and I'm sure we are going to continue with many more examples. So without further delay, let's hear from Robert Pepper. Well, he doesn't need introduction, but he's the head of the connectivity and technology policy at Facebook. Bob, can you share your experience and cases, please?
Yeah, so again, a great shout out to the organizers, ISOC, and the One World Connected project that Cheryl just talked about. So I'm going to actually talk about SDG 9, which is infrastructure, but before I do that, just a couple of comments on some of the previous speakers. I love Jack's point about the importance of the internet creating sort of sharing of information, building communities, and building communities is clearly what Facebook is about. And I'm going to refer back to this in terms of some of the work that we've done with the Economist Intelligence Unit. And on the gender gap issues that both Jack and Cheryl referred to, the global average top line, which is the headline, that there's this huge gap, is great to grab attention. But averages actually are not very useful. We have to dive down deeper to understand. And some of the work that we've done with the Economist Intelligence Unit begins to look at the gender gap on a country-by-country basis. And what we found, so let me just back up for a second and come back to that, because last year, for the first time as kind of a beta test, we did a study with the Economist Intelligence Unit. They did all the number collection, data analysis, that we ended up calling the Internet Inclusion Index. We looked at 46 indicators for 75 countries. And when we did the analysis, they clustered into 4 areas. Availability, which is supply side, and that's the infrastructure I'll come back to. Affordability, which is obvious, but then relevance and readiness. And when you began to look at the questions surrounding why are people either connected and using and benefiting from the internet, or why not, you have to look at all 4 of those areas. So it's about supply side, the availability of the infrastructure, SDG 9, which is the necessary but not sufficient prerequisite. Nothing happens unless there's connectivity. But even with connectivity, there are other variables that get people to use and benefit from the internet. And this actually goes to some of the things that we've been already talking about. What we found was that being connected was not the same as inclusion. And inclusion depends upon being connected, using, and benefiting from the applications, right? And that's really essential to understand. And so that brings me back to the more granular analysis on the gender gap. Last year was the first year we did the study. Thought of it more as a beta test. We learned a lot. We've improved it. We looked at 75 countries. This year we're looking with The Economist at 86 countries. We're going to be releasing the results at Mobile World Congress at the end of February. But one of the things that we found as we're beginning to get the results this year, looking specifically at the gender gap, is that the good news is that there's rough parity, statistically significant parity, in about 20% of countries. The bad news is that that means in 80% of the countries there is not statistically significant parity. And so in other words, if you're looking at a country that has 86% of the men connected and 85% of the women connected, statistically based upon the sampling, it's essentially parity. By the way, in Saudi Arabia, there are 85% of men and 85% of women connected. But being connected, again, doesn't necessarily mean full inclusion, because that goes to the issues of the applications that you have available. How are people using it and benefiting? Interestingly, there are a number of countries in which there is an important statistically significant gender gap in favor of women. So we need to understand why in those countries men are not and boys are not online and using and benefiting the same way that women are, women and girls. So we're really beginning this year to dive down and tease out some really important information that we're just beginning to get the early results from, and then we'll make all of that available. One of the things with this study that is not what most studies do is we started this last year. It was important to us to make all of the data available. So I think of the data as a public good. And so if you go to the Economist Intelligence Unit website and find it, you'll find the Excel spreadsheets with the data for each of the 46 indicators for each of the 75 countries. But now let me shift to one of the important findings on related to SDG 9, infrastructure. I've already mentioned that inclusion is more than just being connected. We found that, well, as we all know, about 3.5, actually the good news is it's closer to 3.8, not 4.5 billion people are not connected at all. So that's one of our priorities. But we also found that a majority of the people who were connected were what we called underconnected. Right? And what do I mean by that? If you understand, as I said earlier, that inclusion means being able to use and benefit from all of the rich applications, it means you need really good broadband, robust, persistent connections. 2G is not enough, right? You can barely be connected even with 2.5G, what they call GPRS. 3G begins to get you there, but it's not a native internet protocol network. You really need the equivalent of 4G LTE that's going to give you the type of connection with good download, upload, low latency, and persistent connections. And that's the type of infrastructure that you need. So, when we look around the world, and we use the data to help us understand the types of connections that people have that either they don't have or that they do have where they're underconnected. And if you look across, for example, Africa, there's between 80 and 85% of people have available to them a 2G voice GSM signal, right? But less than 40%, less than 30% a year ago had available to them a 4G signal. So they really can't, people, even though they can do voice, cannot do full, robust internet connectivity. And if you take a look at globally the case across the world, there are a couple of things that need to happen in order for the networks and network operators to upgrade from 2G to 4G. First, they need more spectrum, but the good news is most governments and regulators understand that, and spectrum is being made available. It turns out that one of the biggest gating factors, one of the biggest barriers for upgrading 2G to 3G and ultimately 4G networks is the lack of backhaul. Good backhaul, right? We talk about everything being wireless, whether it's Wi-Fi or mobile, but I don't care if it's Wi-Fi or mobile, it has to connect into a core network to get pulled back into the network to be connected. When people ask me, is the world going to be fiber or broadband wireless? The answer is yes. You need both. So very specifically and concretely, in a very practical way, what we're trying to do is solve the backhaul problem by partnering with operators to give them the ability to scale from 2G to 4G. One example of that, and we're looking at projects globally, one example of that, though, is we just partnered with Airtel and BCS, a small network infrastructure company, and Airtel is a mobile operator, and we in northwest rural Uganda. We just finished building and turned on a 770-kilometer fiber core network, digging trenches, putting in poles, crossing the Nile, building fiber across northwest Uganda. And as a result, Airtel is now able to migrate its sort of narrow band mobile network in northwest Uganda to full data networks, right? And as a result, people are getting on and downloading and using applications they could never use before, right? It's very practical. It's not easy, but it's the type of work that needs to be done. We see the partnership, we see the relationship with the mobile operators as a partnership in which it's we're mutually dependent upon one another. It's a symbiotic relationship. We need really, really good networks for the future of the applications and content, which is going to be video. The Cisco forecast several years ago that was by 2020, 80% of all the data across whether it's mobile or fixed internet connections will be video. We're already there. They need to make the transition from voice companies selling minutes of voice to full data companies, and when they do that, they benefit from more applications, more content, with bigger data plans, and there's this mutual interdependence. So, those are some of the things that we're doing to do that, and I can come back later and talk about our Express Wi-Fi projects. I know One World Connect has looked at those in the access. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bob. It's always a pleasure to hear all your data, and I'm sure if you have something already, Jack will be, she had to leave, I think, for another session, but she will be pleased to receive the, the information from the report also to the BPF. So I know and I understand there are some questions already that people want to ask, but let's hold for a minute. We are going to hear from some of the projects who submitted contributions, and I think it's important also to hear. We are going to start with Ezekiel Tari, who is from Vanuatu. He's the chairman of the project so sorry if I'm not saying that correctly, but Mauo Telecommunications Community Vital Project. So please go ahead and share what you were doing. You have a video, right? Sure. Okay. As Bobby was saying, now presentations are arriving also here. So.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this time. How we can arrange for this forum to continue with the projects in the various remote areas. I'm Ezekiel Tari from Maivo Telecommunication. I'm the chairman for the Maivo Telecommunication Committee. I'll talk about that project. It's a community project, and to start off, it's like the people out there in my community have been struggling for the telecommunication services and the internet connectivity. We've been seeing people suffering with conditions of the health. We have health facilities there, but no proper communications to cater for the services to be delivered accordingly in time. So therefore, we have come up with the idea of let's do something about the issue going. So we began to talk about, and we form a committee locally, and then they choose me to be the chairman of the committee. And yes, we've come up with some fundraise. And you know, by the time you have to go to certain places that you can access with the internet, or you can access with the telephone, the cell phones. There's no accessibility in my island, as one of these reports have said. And so we've made the fundraise, and we continue with the project. And now we have a project there, which is called, we have 2 phases for the project. One is the telemedicine, which someone have, if somebody is sick, then they take him to the health center. The nurse there can look at the sick patient, which at first they have to climb a long way with the steep hills, very remote area with muddy parts, and it's very difficult. There's no straining beds. They have to find ways how to carry the sick patient up to the other side. So for that reason, we come up with the establishment for the committee, and we work hard to fundraise locally. And we have, I'm here to say also thank you for partners who are supporting us with the project to deliver some assistance to make the project going. So the first phase is about the telemedicine, and we have challenges there, but I think it affects the life to become better for the health services. The doctor or the nurse have to sit there, and he can communicate with other doctors through the telemedicine project. Another one is to get to the education, to get kids to know about the internet connection and accessibility in the education. And it's been there, and we have challenges. It means that we have put up the extension, but we have problem with the repeat station. So it's something to talk about. As I'm talking now, it's all welcome about how we can partnership with the extension for the vital, like the learning project for the kids. And yeah, we have a video. It's something to show us about what the project has been doing there, and it's great, with a great impact the lives, bringing people up, and it's connected to other worlds, parts of the world, to help services to be drawn and to continue with better lives as we have one. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Ezekiel. And we have the video up.
So we've got just 2 short clips.
Okay.
This first one, you can see that this is how people get from...
I'm sorry, can you turn you on?
Sorry.
Okay.
There you
No,
go.
that's okay.
So this is how people get from one side of the island to the hospital, which is actually on another island. They have to carry people over a stretcher because there's no road, and then get to a boat, take a boat to another island, and then potentially also get on a plane to get to the capital. And then there's another, just a short clip, which is the nurse climbing one of the towers to fix it. Yeah.
So both Pepper and Cheryl were nice enough to mention when we're connected. It is a study at the University of Pennsylvania we're doing as case studies to try to bring some empirical rigor and some traction across projects to understand what is going to work. And I have to say a personal debt of thanks to the people in Vanuatu. The team in Vanuatu has been great partners with us and frankly remotely participated in the last IGF in ways that I found terribly inspiring. It's a classic traditional community network where the people with no other experience made a network out of nothing and without connectivity didn't really have access to other resources but just aside from what they could develop on their own and the connections. And so what the kinds of things they have accomplished, one of the things we're proudest about in this session is to give a chance for people who've done amazing things to share their stories with the rest of us, because that is ultimately, until it happens at the ground level, nothing that we say at the high level really matters. So I really have to say thank you to you for all your efforts.
So next, I think we have Andrea is already in the room? Or Nasco, okay. Okay, so let's, Danielle Page, right? Danielle, okay. From NASCO Feeding Minds, can you please share then your results? And now we're going, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You're going to put the video also? Okay, perfect, perfect. And Andrea, I think it's held in the line, so. Perfect, okay.
You want to start with the video?
You want to start with the video or start talking? Okay, sure, sure. Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't tell they are from Ghana. Yeah. Okay.
Everywhere the streets were gold, milk flows from taps like of education. Once upon a time, a boy of 12 left home for lack of education in pursuit of a utopian life in Europe, which was like a chorus sung in every conversation in Ghanaian society. Everywhere the streets were gold, milk flows from taps like water. The journey to Europe had begun, meandering his way through dead bodies in the desert and the mafia. At the belly of death, the voyage had begun. The tales told at home did not include the cruelty, the risk, and the death that awaited patrons of the journey. Who would have dared? If only someone had told him the reality. If only he had had access to education. If only he had had access to information about you, Usman Umar would not have undertaken a 5-year trekking journey to the Wonderland. Information has become the most important fabric, weaving and shaping our society, our communities, and the world. Information and communication technology has become the bedrock of global development. Lack of these means the prevalence of illiteracy, human and social underdevelopment. The speed with which information communication technology, ICT, is developing, and its impact on socio-economic activities cannot be overemphasized. It is imperative that Africa is not excluded from this technological revolution. It is a stark fact that the use of ICT has been integrated into virtually every facet of commerce, education, governance, and civic activity in developed countries, and has become a critical factor in creating wealth worldwide. Unfortunately, in Africa, ICT has barely taken a foothold. Computer illiteracy and a lack of access to ICT are widely recognized as an increasingly powerful obstacle to the economic economic, civic and political development of Africa. According to the UN ICT Task Force, nowhere is the digital divide more pronounced than in countries of the African continent. Africa is the most unconnected in an increasingly connected world. This is where Ghana as a country finds itself. It is against this background that the ICT Literacy Project was designed by NASCO, Nuhu and Usman collaboration. The ICT Literacy Project is designed to offer the best of training, knowledge, skill and information to students in particular, and the general public at large. The organization is founded on the premise that universal primary education is vital to the global community. Our mission is to provide academic resources and to support educational initiatives in underserved communities by strengthening collaboration between African educators and their global counterparts. 3 centers of learning have been established. 8,241 students have passed through our ICT training programs in Introduction to ICT, Intermediate and Advanced courses, and 3,298 currently studying at the centers. Some of our students are gainfully employed in secretarial portfolios, graphic designing, web designing, as well as applying the knowledge in ICT in other areas of study, as they cling on to the educational ladder. Hitherto, these students ended in the streets with no skills and eventually embark on the journey of no return, chasing the Europe dream. Support from Labdu, UPC, Nibus Denmark will see the establishment of more centers this summer. The significance of our work has attracted the attention of Open Arms and Operative on the Mediterranean Sea to cushion us on our sensitization program and tackle the migration crisis at source. Other projects include educational accessibility for students living with disabilities, beekeeping as economic empowerment for women, and volunteering. In an increasingly pronounced population growth, the activities of NASCO Foundation may be meager or probably just a tiny spark, but we may never know when the spark becomes a flame.
Well done, well done. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, definitely. I think, hello, yeah, that's the reality, definitely. Sometimes we normally see this kind of videos on the newspapers and news and things like that, and this real, here I am. I mean, I've passed through all this situation when I was at the age of 14. I was able to go through all these difficulties, bury my own blood friends on the way, on the desert, the sea. I arrived Spain, that was 2005, almost illiterate, 17, 18 years. If I tell you guys, I'm just studying my master's degree in and Dirección de Cooperación Internacional. I don't know how to say it in English. My word is
International Corporation?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then that's real because in only 10 years, for example, I've been able to pass through all the education systems, the Spanish education system, and I've just graduated last June, and I'm now doing my master's degree. And of course, we have to share this luck we had with a lot of other people, other children down there. That's why NASCO was funded, and I mean, that's what we do. So I'll like my partner, Danny, will explain a little bit more into detail what NASCO does in particular. But the fact is that I remember my first day in Barcelona, that was 24th of February 2005. I was moving all over the street, searching for, let's say, milk on the street, because in my country, in Africa, in Ghana in particular, we think we don't have to milk cows to get milk. No. You only get a fund where milk just comes from, for example. So this where we have the real situations and the real problems and how to tackle these real problems in the source where it generated. Thank you very much, and I think Dan will give you more details about what the NASCO activities are in particular.
Yeah. Okay. The NGO NASCO Feeding Minds was founded at the precise moment Osman stopped wondering why he had gone through all this and started asking instead for what purpose he had gone through all this. Okay, what was destiny expecting from him? The answer to why NASCO was born is simple, so that no one else has to go through what he went through. Therefore, the next question to ask is what pushed him to go through all that? The answer is twofold. First, he lacked reliable information. Second, his country could not provide him real education and self-development opportunities. We believe that if we are able to find solutions to these two problems, we will be able to stop the unacceptable tragedies that are taking place in this very moment. Yes, in this very moment, as I'm speaking, there is probably several groups crossing the desert that have to drink their own urine to survive. People that spend all their life savings are right now drowning in the sea. The absence of information might lead some funny moments, as he said before, the first day in Barcelona, he was looking for the milk fountain. But other times it's deadly, as it was for his journey companions who did not know what would happen if they paid mobsters to cross the desert. Libraries may solve this lack of information. Nowadays, however, we have this revolutionary tool called the internet that reaches the whole world. Knowing how to use Wikipedia, Facebook, or Google provides access to a vast range of information, which can allow people to take more rational decisions, evaluating the risks associated with any action they plan. However, providing access to this information is not enough. Even after finding out that they have 95% chance of dying if they repeat Osman's journey, they might still decide to undertake it. And in order to avoid more tragedies, they must have the chance to prosper in their own countries. It's unthinkable to believe that you can attract investments from traditional industrial companies, such as from the automotive sector, for example, because there is no internal demand, no real infrastructures to export, and nor a high level of trained human capital. The technology and information sector, however, is different. You do not need growth to export, nor a high internal demand. You only need qualified human capital. At NASCO, we collect computers, no longer in use in the first world, and we send them to Ghana, so students can use them in their classes. We fight climate change by recycling products that will help change lives of the Ghanaian people. The recycled computers are then adapted for our classrooms, which become computer centers, with access to worldwide information and education. Nowadays, more than 6,000 students have already attended our courses. We are very proud to aid each one of these students. Nevertheless, we want to reach 9 million students, the approximate population between 6 to 18 years in Ghana. In order to achieve this, we need to create 15,000 classrooms. We are seeking companies and individuals that want to help us reach this number. We are far away from our objective. However, this does not discourage any of our volunteers, nor any of us. We will continue investing, as we have done to get here, our time and our personal money and resources until we achieve our goals. Some of our students have never used a computer before and learn really basic tasks such as how to rename a file. Others have used our classes as the stepping stone to study degrees in computer science. One of them is Tasare, currently teacher in one of our schools. Another example of success is Osman's brother, Banasco. Banasco desperately wanted to migrate to Europe following his brother's Osman's footsteps. Access to information and the possibility of having an education in his own country radically changed his destiny. Now he has his own startup with 6 employees and more than 45,000 users. So that's the way.
Very good, congratulations. And after the master comes the PhD, so you're never stopping. But anyway, so thank you very much, congratulations. And Andrea has finally arrived, thank you very much. I know it's hard with the queue. Andrea is from Colombia, and she's going to present the Macaya project, right? Gracias por venir.
Hello, everybody. So thank you for this invitation. The project is La Basa Foundation project, and we are working in Colombia Meta. So I'm going to switch on Spanish because I think I feel better if I can speak in Spanish, if there is not a problem. Perfect. Okay. I can go to the slide, please.
The slides or the video?
First of all, the video, yes. Thank you very much.
Me levanto a las 5 de la mañana, después me voy a bañar, me visto, alisto el recreo, las 11, desayuno y me vengo. Antes de tener internet, nos tocaba preguntarle a las personas que hayan vivido hace harto tiempo o a los papás. Yo creo que el internet ha cambiado la vida mía y de mis compañeros para el bien. A mí me gustaría buscar en el internet para poder saber más sobre la ingeniería civil.
En Colombia hay muchas personas que están desconectadas y la gran mayoría están en el campo. En el momento en que uno empieza a conectar a estas personas tienen acceso a internet y esta es una puerta que les abre conocimiento de diferentes temas que para ellos son relevantes en su día a día. La ANE, al generar la posibilidad de que se utilizara el espectro para banda ancha, el espectro que normalmente se utilizan los radiodifusores de televisión, habilita la posibilidad de conectar a los no conectados en Colombia. Estos no conectados hacen parte de las zonas rurales en las cuales ellos pueden tener acceso a internet a través de las escuelas o en sus propias fincas.
Hay dificultad para el aprendizaje de los niños. Es una herramienta que me ha servido muchísimo para desarrollar las clases. Hay un cambio en los estudiantes, hay más motivación, se ve el interés, la sed que tienen los niños por aprender, innovar, investigar y tener nuevos conocimientos.
Y vemos realmente que es una tecnología que favorece la conectividad a bajo costo, que es asequible. Esa normatividad es la primera que se expide en América Latina. Fuimos reconocidos por la DSA, que es la Alianza de Uso Dinámico del Espectro. Hemos tenido ya varios países que se han acercado a preguntarnos un poco cómo hemos manejado el tema y creemos que ha sido como muy aterrizado el proyecto. No ha sido simplemente montemos la tecnología per se, sino analicemos el contexto, analicemos qué queremos, cuál es el fin social y a partir de eso hemos venido actuando.
No teníamos el internet, pero hoy en día sí podemos contar con él. Y pues nos ha beneficiado muchísimo porque mi hijo ya puede hacer las tareas, puede investigar, tareas que la profesora le deja. Y pues también nosotros nos hemos capacitado también con el internet. Ha sido una maravilla para nosotros.
Pues la vaina ha adelantado mucho porque ya por lo menos hay una biblioteca pública dentro de la vereda y hay internet. La biblioteca tiene internet. Ahí nos hemos estado capacitando y mirando lo que no habíamos podido ver durante toda la vida. Esperaría mucho porque mejoraría la tecnología dentro de la finca. O sea, yo aspiro que teniendo internet podemos ser más rentables. Una ventaja muy grande, porque uno ya coge y escribe un WhatsApp y lo manda y al momentico ya lo leyeron, ya supieron qué pasó. Acceder a cursos de capacitación en el CENB. Seguirme capacitando porque la idea es capacitarme. Seguirme capacitando en veterinaria porque pues tengo una finca con ganadito, entonces me gustaría lo de la veterinaria y me gustaría capacitarme sobre cacao y café. Son cultivos que me llaman la atención para hacer como técnico agropecuario.
Es una gran satisfacción poder ver a esas personas que antes tenían que desplazarse de un punto a otro en varias horas, con sus maletas, con sus libros, y ahora poder ver que gracias a la tecnología pues se pueden conectar a través de internet.
We can go with the slide.
Okay, I think the video was self-descriptive, but just to give an overview, it talks about access in rural areas, how access to spectrum for broadband was important. And you have Marta Suarez, the head of the Spectrum Agency there, and then there are some access through schools and libraries, and how this changes not only the child learning to give kids more interested in studying, but also change their knowledge and capacity, but also the adult who develop skills and look for other interested areas, in this case in rural environment for vet and, for cacao growth, but I think Colombia is also known by coffee. So anyway, Andrea, if you can speak slowly, and then
Okay, perfect. Bueno, este es un proyecto que nace gracias al interés de la Fundación Lavazza, un torrefactor italiano.
This is a project that was born with the funding from the organization Lavazza. It's an Italian company?
Yes.
Okay.
Y la idea era incorporar el componente tecnológico en un proyecto que estaba trabajando temas de productividad y calidad de café.
And the goal was to incorporate the technological component into the coffee productive system.
Cuando llegamos nos encontramos, si quieres pasemos to the second slide, please. Cuando llegamos en la región, nosotros nos encontramos en una zona remota, en una zona rural, sin conectividad, con dificultad de acceso, con poca infraestructura, y todo lo que nos estábamos imaginando.
Okay, and when they found the place and they arrived there, they land there, they discovered they had no infrastructure and really few capacities there.
Cuando llegamos allí, estábamos imaginando una serie de escenarios tecnológicos, entre ellos Internet of Things, pero nos dimos cuenta que no era posible porque no había conectividad.
So they were imagining some scenarios with Internet of Things, but when they arrived there, they discovered it was not possible because they didn't have not even the groundwork in the land.
Entonces fue un momento muy especial porque Microsoft estaba adelantando ya un piloto en Colombia con la tecnología TV White Spaces, y al mismo tiempo la Agencia Nacional del Espectro estaba aprobando una ley para utilizar el espectro en zonas rurales.
So they discovered they had this opportunity because Microsoft was already pushing for some TV white spaces allocation in rural areas, and the Spectrum Agency in Colombia was already creating these policies, enabling policies.
Entonces, este es un proyecto que de verdad une el sector privado, el sector público, las instituciones, el gobierno central y el gobierno regional para llevar conectividad en una zona remota.
So it's really a project that brings together the public sector, the private sectors, and also the, let's say, municipal, the cities, and the regional authorities. Yes.
Hoy en día hemos conectado 2 escuelas en esta zona de Colombia que se llama Mesetas. Hemos conectado 5 fincas caficultoras, y lo que estamos haciendo es introduciendo los componentes de formación en apropiación tecnológica.
Okay, they have already connected 5 coffee farms, if I can say so. Can I say coffee farms, right? Okay, you got it.
And 2 schools.
And 2 schools.
Y ahora lo que estamos haciendo es, tenemos ya la infraestructura gracias a la tecnología TV White Spaces, pero ahora lo que estamos introduciendo son contenidos. ¿Qué hacer con esa infraestructura? ¿Qué hacer con la conectividad? Proyectos de formación, telemedicina. Estamos trabajando con una empresa privada para llevar medicina a estos campesinos que viven lejos de los centros urbanos, y estamos llevando contenidos para mejorar su productividad, para mejorar sus conocimientos, inclusive hasta temas tan fáciles como el precio del café.
Okay, so they solved the infrastructure issue right now by the TV white space use, but then they are targeting the content. So it's not only getting connected, but also having the content. And they are working first with the telemedicine. They are going, they have to the really isolated communities, and then they are also bringing some of the content around the coffee production, and including its less costs about information about the costs and etc. So.
Un ejemplo del impacto que tiene este tipo de proyectos es el tipo de enfermedades que atacan los cultivos, que muchas veces el campesino o su vecino sabe cómo resolver esos problemas, pero no sabe cómo compartir esa información. Entonces, el tener conectividad a través de un simple WhatsApp se puede informar a la comunidad cómo resolver un problema de enfermedades de una planta.
For example, the coffee production has some diseases that attacks the plants, and so the farmers can get information through the centers and by having the access to the internet and make their production be prepared to have a more efficient production.
Este es entonces nuestro proyecto. Estamos sensibilizando otros actores para enriquecer y que se consolide este proyecto y se pueda replicar en diferentes regiones de Colombia, pero en diferentes regiones del mundo.
And now they are working also on how to document and consolidate this experience and replicate in other places in Colombia and around the world. So thank you very much. Gracias, Andrea. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for sharing all this amazing experience. We've been very hard on the time. It's about to close, but it's important also to hear from others. So is there any other questions, comments?
Okay. There's one team here from Gambia.
Okay.
Give one project of digital literacy for girls, so please.
Okay, go ahead. But please be short. We're short on time. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for giving us this chance to talk about our project. Basically, we started this project in 2015. One of the first projects that we started with was the All Girls Tech Camp, because Gambia digital literacy, like many of the African countries, is very low. Most of the girls, especially in the rural areas, don't even know how to use computers. So we started this project in 2015, training girls on basic ICT. They went up to the level of being able to code, start building mobile apps and web development. As I speak right now, our website is being managed by people that we train in our in the project, which is part of the success stories of the initiative. Last year we won the Google Fire Award. And part of the initiative we're trying to push now is to create tech centers and libraries in the Gambia. We set up a library in one of the rural communities last year. This year we realized that almost 100% of the girls attending the library all gain admission to high school, because the library is providing them that space, that safe space to explore their potential. It's always a center that they can come and learn to use most of these things. And through the initiative also, we link them with entrepreneurs to provide mentorship for them, because we realize that is a chain that has been missing in most of the projects that people are involved in. They just train these people and leave them on their own. But one of the things that we're doing is to link them with entrepreneurs and young leaders in the country who could help mentor them. And successfully, all the girls that we have trained are really doing well in those areas. And we're also using ICT for advocacy through internet initiative in the country, because Gambia was a dictator. We were having a dictator regime for 22 years. So part of the intergenerational dialogue initiative that we were using through internet advocacy was to get people to come out and vote. Last year, we remember before the elections, it was very difficult talking about politics, but we were able to mobilize a lot of young people, use the internet, go to communities, get them out to vote. And 48 hours before the elections, the internet was shut down. The government used some bad repressive laws to shut down the internet. But notwithstanding, our people were already empowered to go to communities to get people to vote. And then with the new government also, we are pushing for those laws to be squashed, because with just a Facebook post, one can go to jail for 15 years in the Gambia. So, and those laws are still there. We're trying to advocate to see how best we change most of those policies and laws in the country. And moving forward also, there's a new project that we're launching called the Prison Code Project, because we don't have a prison reform in the Gambia. Most of the time they take people to prison not to correct them but to punish them. So we're working with the prison department in trying to see most of these juveniles that are being incommunicado at the moment to help train them on ICT in trying to give them skills. When they go out, they can be responsible people in society. And recently also we're launching a disability project called the Empowered Project that is being led by my colleague here. So also it's trying to include everybody, women, minorities, and people having disabilities, in order to empower them to actively participate in society, because we believe it's only through education that we can change our communities, and hopefully with time, maybe we will also be part of the other countries that have successfully achieved most of these sustainable development goals. And thank you very much for that opportunity to express our project.
Thanks to you, and thanks for sharing. So is there any other comments or questions? I don't see any hands, and I think we are about 1 minute to close. I just want to really, I think Christopher already said, but it's really, really amazing. I'm in the awe here, like hearing what you were doing on the ground. I mean, I come also from Brazil, which has its challenges, but I mean, you guys are doing an amazing job. So keep going. I mean, we can bring here these policies, challenges, and that's important to consolidate them. But it's also important to look the other way around and see what has been done and why policies needs to be an enabler and not a blocking for all of this work. So thank you very much. I think, Christopher, you want to say?
So I just wanted to say thank you to the people who traveled so far to be with us. You're sharing your stories is really exceptional, and it really is what we need to hear more of. So we're in your debt. We're very proud at One World Connected in the University of Pennsylvania. We've now collected 120 such case studies of different kinds. If you're interested in hearing more, Grand Marg Project, Sharbani Balur is here with us. On Thursday at 10:40, we'll have 5 more presentations of people who are actually doing projects on the ground, and we'll talk about the other work we're doing collecting case studies. So if you've enjoyed this kind of environment, you will have another opportunity to hear from more people who are actually making it happen in the real world.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And as a final comment, please do send if you have additional cases, additional comments, you can send to us. We're consolidating a final outcome report by the end of the year. Well, it's just there, but we still have time. And a big, big shout out to Mili and Sharada, who really helped us here. Thank you very much, everyone.
I'm so glad you made it. Thank
yes,
you.
it was incredible to go in. It was hard, but I don't know what happened because I did the registration. But I was
It's not just together. So there's Cheryl. She's in charge of the governing committee for this whole organization. They lost her registration. It took her an hour and a half. I'm sorry.
But at the end, I am here, and that is good.
Well, I think it is wonderful the work you are doing. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. We are trying also to grow and to consolidate more this model. And I think Colombia has all the we can do it because Colombia is working a lot for the rural areas. So
It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This is your baby. Absolutely.
I would like to put the new Cavalier, public speakers.